Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the Australian comedian Jim Jefferies, who, funny enough, just became a United States citizen, even though from what I've seen, all Jim does is rip on this country and call us racist bigots time and time again. For example, our first video about the guy came out back in 2017, when Jim was trying to say that President Trump compares to Adolf Hitler, you know, the anti-Semitic Nazi dictator from Germany, who killed millions of Jewish people in the Holocaust. Yet, somehow, Trump is literally Hitler, according to Jim Jefferies, even though, of course, our president obviously hasn't killed anyone, and needless to say, he doesn't hate Jews either. Shit, Trump's daughter and grandkids are Jewish, after all. So, I don't know what the heck Jim Jefferies is talking about, but it's obvious Trump doesn't hate those people. And if you want to catch up on my last Jim J video, I've got a link with the full details to it below, right below this video. But for now, let's move on to the stories for today. Today we're talking about how Jim Jefferies has finally been busted for deceptively editing his interviews with anti-SJWs, some very similar to yours truly here on YouTube. And yeah, this is something we've known that Jim has been doing for a long time now too. Last summer, another YouTuber caught him doing this just last June. The YouTube channel Diversity in Comics, now called Comics Matter with your boy Zach, well, he went on the Jim Jefferies show last summer to talk about, well, like his channel name used to be, Diversity in Comics, funny enough. And when this happened, Jim Jefferies did his usual shady shit. He recorded a big long video with Zach that was eventually cut down to just a few clips that was only included in a few minutes of his show. And to make things worse, the Jim Jefferies show would shamelessly cut and re-edit stuff to try and make its anti-SJW guests look bad or worse. Yeah, Jim Jefferies is a bit of a social justice warrior grifter at this point. He's co-opting their bullshit left-wing ideology publicly in order to stay in good graces with his channel Comedy Central and other liberals like them. It also helps him make money. Your boy Zach went on the show to talk about how social justice warriors have ruined the comic book industry. Well, Jim Jefferies did whatever he could to try and make our anti-SJW side look bad. And he wanted to make people like us look racist and silly too. Here's a quick example from that interview with Zach, where Jim Jefferies asked Diversity in Comics what he thinks about a black Superman. Take a look for yourselves.
Okay, so how do you feel about this black Superman? Okay, a slightly less black Superman.
Yeah, no, that's actually better.
You see how they had to cut Zach off and move on there to the next part? Well, that's because they were altering what he said in order to make the anti-SJW side look worse. This is clearly done to make him look more offensive and racist too, when of course, he's really not. Zach's a good guy from what I hear. In fact, the worst part about all of this is what Diversity in Comics actually said, and what the people at the Jim Jefferies show edited out. And well, what he said was, the lighter Superman is better because he's both black and Latino, and therefore more diverse than the darker toned one. He's got like double diversity or something. Jim didn't include this part of the explanation in his answer on TV though, of course. Only the first part was in there in order to suggest that Zach was happy that the character was lighter, implying he's a racist or something. Really, Zach and many others, like us, were just jaded. After we've seen character after character and comic after comic being ruined by SJW bullshit, well, that makes you a little gun shy when you see a black or brown Superman on top of that. I don't know why social justice warriors think black or brown washing is okay, while also thinking whitewashing characters is evil and racist, but yeah, they do. And this kind of hypocrisy and double standard is what makes Jim Jefferies such a hack as well. He doesn't understand what he's talking about here, clearly, and his only goal is to make money by pandering to liberals and SJWs at Comedy Central. And this kind of shenanigans is why a lot of people wish Zach had also recorded the interview himself on a separate camera, so he could prove to the world just how dishonest these Comedy Central people are. And well, back to the present, and another YouTuber did just that. Meet Avi Yemeni, an Australian YouTuber who recently appeared on the Jim Jefferies show as well. Except this time, this YouTuber came in fully prepared to expose Jim Jefferies if he pulled this kind of deceptive editing again. Avi actually managed to secretly record his entire interview too, so that now, later on, we can all see how shady and deceptive the Jim Jefferies show and Comedy Central really are about this. Here's a bit from Avi's video so you can see what I'm talking about.
So a few months ago, Jim Jefferies' producer contacted me and asked me to come on as a guest to his show. Now, I agreed with two conditions. One, there'll be no neo-Nazi or Nazi sympathizers on the same segment. The second one was that they don't cut my answers from one question and put it to another. Now, to my horror, but not my surprise, they did exactly both.
Ugh, awkward. So it sounds like this guy went in ready for this bullshit though. He set up the best prefaces he could before getting interviewed. He said no Nazi stuff and no deceptive editing, but instead of just turning him down and moving on to another person to talk to, the Jim Jefferies show decided to say yes to Avi's terms. But then they promptly defied both of them, as we'll soon see. And like he said, it's not really surprising either. A company and show that's willing to deceptively edit interviews in order to basically lie and make their SJW opponents look bad, well, if they're shady enough to do that, then they certainly wouldn't mind lying to you about it in the first place, just to get you in the interview. These liberal SJWs at Comedy Central clearly have no morals. They have no scruples or journalistic integrity either. I mean, why should they? It's not like Comedy Central is an actual news channel or anything. Sure, they pretend to be sometimes with shows like The Daily Show, Colbert Report, or even Tosh.0 to some extent, but those shows also openly admit that they're satire, and the latter two would hardly distort an interview like this. Colbert and Tosh actually derive their humor from their eccentric hosts, not from deceptively editing guests to make them look bad. But back to another one of those shows. The Daily Show, on the other hand, has been known to do this shitty and shady editing before too, and it looks like Jim Jefferies has taken a big cue from them on this. The basic model from The Daily Show, and now Jim Jefferies, is to get an annoying anti-American host, like Jim Jefferies from Australia or Trevor Noah from South Africa hosting The Daily Show. And then, since their hosts are boring and unfunny and have weird accents, well, they have to bring in political opponents who they can make look bad by way of shady editing and deceiving their audience. For example, let's turn to a time The Daily Show did this a while back. Gavin McInnes had this very thing happen to him when he appeared on The Daily Show back in 2016. Here's a clip of Gavin and his commentary on that situation when it happened back then a few years ago.
I can't name soccer players, so I make up these ridiculous names. And then, as if the list wasn't ridiculous enough, I add the last name Junebug, a soccer player named Junebug. He goes like this, those are deep cuts. And when they air it, they pretend I was serious. You see, even after the interview, I go, you know those names were made up, right?
Classic left-wing manipulation right there. I can't even count the number of times this kind of thing has happened to me too on YouTube. Be careful if you're going to be making jokes on here, guys, because there will always be a shady left-winger who will pull them out of context and try and take your jokes seriously. I've had whole 30-minute videos based on this made about me. In fact, this also happened to me again just last week. A while back, some random high schoolers started making videos about me, and well, they tried to pull this whole got ya game on me one time, asking me if I know what socialism means. I thought that was a funny question to ask, especially on a live stream, so I immediately goofed on them for asking me these high school level questions. And then I also proceeded to give them some fake, funny answers as a goof. I first said socialism was when there was one family of leaders who passed down the reins to the oldest son, generation by generation. Obviously, this was a definition of a monarchy, so everyone watching the show had a good laugh, but these stupid high school kids didn't take it that way. They decided to take my fake joke answers seriously, and they are still claiming I don't know what socialism is to this day, months after that stream. And well, this is basically the same thing The Daily Show is doing to Gavin McInnes in this video we're watching now, except the shady liberals at The Daily Show, they don't have as good excuses. They're not young and dumb high school students trying to make a name for themselves on YouTube, and they also have better equipment and higher production value too, so when they deceptively edit things, it's even worse on their part, because to the normal person it's much harder to tell.
Current, we have Bobby Daniels,
Bobby Daniels. Okay, let's check the list. Nope, not a player.
Ziegler Norris,
Also not a player.
and a guy known to everyone as Junebug.
Come on, man.
And there you have it. The Daily Show has been lying and taking anti-SJWs out of context for years. Just like what's happened to me on YouTube, and just like what's happening on the Jim Jefferies show once again, just last week. And with all that said, let's now get back to more of the recent deception from the Jim Jefferies show. Here's some more footage of Avi Yemi's video exposing Jim Jefferies.
What gives anyone the right to tell anyone where they can and can't live?
When you import this culture, what do you think is going to happen? Australia's going to end up the same shithole that they came from, that they were escaping. Watch how Jim Jefferies has edited this last clip to make me look like an ass.
Yeah, and well, it's an absurd question he asked to begin with. What gives anyone the right to tell someone where they can or can't live? Are you serious, Jim? That's like the dumbest question I've ever heard in my life. Might as well say, what gives a homeowner the right to keep children and bums off their property? Well, they happen to own the property for starters, Jim, so they can let in or keep out whoever they want. And sure, countries are bigger and more complex than that, but at the end of the day, the people of a nation represented by the government, they have a right to keep in or out whoever they want at their borders. borders. The real question we should be asking here is, why does Jim think open borders are such an obvious and logical thing to do? And why does he assume they're good? Because all signs point to open borders being bad and wrong and something that will make your country worse, despite what the radical liberals and SJWs say about it. So we already saw the fake answer which Jim Jefferies' editors pieced together to try and make Avi look bad here. Now let's turn to his own camera phone's footage to see how he really responded to this ridiculous question.
Anyone the right to tell anyone where they can and can't live? Really? Like,
Borders,
I know borders,
yeah.
but wouldn't it just be nice if we got to a place in society where we had a utopia where we all just lived as
on a level, I agree
you
with
may
you.
say I'm a dream.
So Avi even says on a level he agrees with Jim. Sure, if we were being big hippies who were trying to save everyone in the world, and if everything was fair and equal, then yeah, in that fantasy world situation, it would be nice to let people live wherever they want. But for one, we're not living in a fantasy. And two, even if we did live in that perfect utopian world, even then people would still have borders and boundaries and rules and regulations and government. Think about it. Even if everyone on the planet were millionaires who didn't need money and had their own place to live, well, we still wouldn't want to let people live wherever they want. There would be rules and laws and zoning and property restrictions. Why else would people even buy land or houses anyway? If everyone can live everywhere, then really no one is living anywhere. It's really hard to think about because it's such a dumb idea and it makes such little sense. And well, as for the interview, we can clearly see Avi did not say what the final edit made him appear to say. He acknowledged that the sentiment here was good, but it's not practical or logical in the real world. And the SJWs know this too, but they're counting on their bleeding heart constituents to still go for these virtue signaling type premises. And things get even worse for Jim Jefferies if you watch all of Avi's video, the exposed one. I have a link to his video below if you want the full story, but basically, behind the scenes, Jim goes on to bash Muslims a bit himself during this interview. Yeah, when he thinks the cameras are off or when he knows he can edit it out, Jim isn't this big pro-Islam SJW like you would think. No, Jim appears to be a phony, fake, wannabe liberal who's only doing this bullshit to fit in at Comedy Central. As I've said before, this is nothing new for Comedy Central either. They've deceptively edited interviews with anti-SJWs before, like the one we saw from last year when they interviewed diversity in comics on this same Jim Jefferies show. And also, like the other one we went over, The Daily Show has been doing this shady bullshit for years too, just like what they did to Gavin McInnes in 2016. Shady practices from a shady, shitty company that's basically a dying cable channel that's only being held up by its one great animated gem, South Park. It's the only powerhouse show left there, besides maybe Tosh.0. In the end, this is nothing new for Comedy Central and its shows either, especially the talk shows and the political fake news ones. They always seem to be overly liberal influenced, and oftentimes overtly social justice warrior, like what I said earlier and what we saw with the Jim Jefferies show and The Daily Show today. And also, one more thing worth mentioning before we go, this is the same channel that hired our least favorite SJW ever, Francesca Ramsey from MTV Decoded. She also worked on a show for Comedy Central called The Nightly Show. She did it for a few seasons too, before it got canned. Comedy Central even tried to make a new SJW show starring Francesca Ramsey herself, but I guess that project never got past the pilot phase. Thank God. What do you guys think? Has Jim Jefferies finally been exposed as not only a shady, deceptive editor who lacks integrity and conviction, but also, is Jim Jefferies a phony hypocrite who makes fun of the very SJWs he pretends to side with publicly when the cameras are off behind the scenes? Tell me what you think about all this in a comment below this video. And thanks again for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed what you saw, and we'll see y'all next time.